The shuttle landed softly on the polished stone of the Imperial Palace. Jake stood near the back of the human delegation, his eyes taking in every detail of the alien world around him. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and two pale moons hung low on the horizon even though it was midday. Everything here was beautiful and strange. Jake was 28 years old, a security officer from Earth. He had grown up in a small town in Kansas, where the biggest excitement was watching storms roll across the plains. Now he stood on a planet 40 light-years from home, surrounded by beings who had traveled the stars for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. They were tall and elegant. Their skin came in shades of violet and blue, and their eyes glowed with soft inner light. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. Jake had read everything he could about them during the long journey here. He knew they were proud. He knew they considered humans to be newcomers, barely worth their attention. Captain Ben led the delegation forward. He was a calm man with gray hair and steady hands. He had told Jake before they landed that this mission was important. Earth needed allies in the galaxy, and the Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. They were escorted into a grand hall with ceilings so high that Jake could barely see the top. Thousands of crystals hung from above, catching the light and sending rainbows dancing across the walls. At the far end of the hall sat Emperor on a throne made of what looked like frozen starlight. And standing beside him was his daughter. Princess was the most beautiful being Jake had ever seen. Her skin was pale violet, and her long silver hair fell past her shoulders like flowing water. Her eyes were gold, bright and sharp, and right now they were looking at the human delegation with open disgust. Jake felt her gaze pass over him like he was nothing more than furniture. The formal greetings took nearly an hour. There were rituals and words that had to be spoken in exactly the right order. Jake stood still and silent, watching everything. He noticed the guards positioned around the room, the way certain courtiers whispered to each other, the subtle tension beneath all the ceremony. When the rituals were complete, Emperor made an announcement that sent a ripple of surprise through the hall. As a gesture of trust and cultural exchange, he said, his voice deep and resonant, a human officer will be assigned to my daughter's personal security detail. Jake felt Captain's hand on his shoulder, pushing him forward gently. He understood. This was the assignment they had discussed. He was to protect the princess and show that humans could be trusted. He stepped forward and bowed low, the way he had been taught. Princess' reaction was immediate. "No," she said, her voice was cold and clear. "I will not accept this." The hall fell silent. Even the Emperor looked surprised by her open refusal. "Daughter," he said carefully, "this arrangement was agreed upon by both our governments." "I do not care what was agreed," said. She looked directly at Jake and her golden eyes were full of contempt. "I will not have a human following me. They are primitives. They still kill each other over land and resources. They live such short, violent lives that they barely have time to learn wisdom before they die." Jake said nothing. He kept his expression calm and his posture respectful. "I have my own guards," continued. "I do not need protection from a species that discovered space travel less than 300 years ago." Captain stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. "Your Highness, officer is one of our finest. He means no disrespect. He only wishes to serve." "He can serve by staying out of my sight," said. Emperor raised his hand, and the hall fell silent again. He looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed patience with warning. "The arrangement will stand," he said. "This alliance is important. You will accept the human officer, and you will treat him with the courtesy befitting our empire." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other. Jake could see the anger burning in his eyes, but he could also see that she would not defy her father publicly. Finally, she looked away. "Very well," she said. Her voice was like ice. "He may follow me, but I will never acknowledge him as anything more than a political inconvenience." She turned and walked out of the hall without looking back. Her silver hair caught the light from the crystals above, and her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Jake let out a slow breath. Captain gave him an apologetic look. "That went about as well as expected," the captain said quietly. Jake nodded. He had known this would not be easy. They had made it clear in every diplomatic communication that they considered humans to be inferior. But he had a job to do, and he intended to do it well. That evening, he took up his position outside the princess's chambers. The guards stationed there looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and scorn. None of them spoke to him. He did not expect them to. The door opened and stepped out. She was dressed in simpler clothes now, though they were still finer than anything Jake had ever owned. She looked at him standing there, and her expression hardened. "You are still here," she said. "Yes, Your Highness," Jake replied. "I told you I do not want you." "I understand," he said, "but I have my duty." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to find something in his face that she could use against him. But Jake kept his expression neutral, his posture respectful. "You humans are stubborn," she said finally. "Yes, Your Highness," he agreed, "we are." Something flickered in her eyes. It might have been surprise, or it might have been irritation. Then she turned and walked away down the corridor, and Jake followed at a respectful distance. He did not try to speak to her again that night. He simply did his job, watching and protecting, even though the person he was protecting wanted nothing to do with him. As the purple sky darkened outside the palace windows, Jake thought about home. He thought about Kansas and the endless fields of wheat under a blue sky. He wondered what his mother would say if she could see him now, standing guard for an alien princess who hated him on a planet so far from Earth that the light from their sun would not reach here for decades. He smiled to himself just a little. This was going to be interesting. 2 weeks passed on Prime, and Jake learned what it meant to be invisible. Princess never spoke to him. She never looked at him. When she moved through the palace, she acted as though he did not exist. Her guards treated him the same way. Jake walked through his days like a ghost, present but unacknowledged. He did not let it bother him. He had a job to do, and he did it well. Every morning, he woke before dawn and took up his position outside the princess's chambers. He followed her to her meetings, her meals, her studies. He stood in corners while she discussed politics with advisors. He waited in hallways while she practiced the ancient arts of combat. He watched everything, learned everything, and said nothing unless spoken to, which was almost never. On the 15th day, there was a gathering in the royal gardens. Nobles from across the empire had come to pay their respects to the emperor. The gardens were filled with flowers that glowed softly in colors Jake had no names for. Strange birds sang in trees with silver leaves. It was beautiful beyond words. Jake stood near a fountain, keeping watch over the princess as she moved through the crowd. She smiled and laughed with the nobles, playing the role of the perfect heir. No one looking at her would guess how cold she could be in private. A group of young lords gathered near where Jake was standing. They did not seem to notice him, or perhaps they simply did not care that he could hear them. "Have you seen the human?" one of them said, laughing. "He follows her around like a lost pet." "I heard they only live 80 years, another said. "Can you imagine? By the time they learn anything useful, they are already dying." "They are still fighting wars on their own planet," a third added, "killing each other over patches of dirt, and they think they deserve a place among the stars." The laughter grew louder. Jake kept his expression calm. He had heard worse. On the journey here, some of the diplomats had made similar comments, though they had been more careful with their words. He noticed glancing in his direction. She had heard the conversation too. For a moment, their eyes met. Jake expected her to look away or perhaps to smile at the jokes being made at his expense. Instead, he saw something strange in her expression. It was not quite discomfort, but it was close. Then she turned back to her guests, and the moment passed. That night Jake sat alone in his small quarters aboard the Horizon Dawn, which remained docked at the palace landing platform. He was studying a language text, trying to improve his pronunciation. He had been working on it every night for 2 weeks. The sounds were difficult for human vocal cords, but he was making progress. Grant, the ship's medical officer, stopped by his door. "You know you do not have to learn their language," she said. "The translation devices work perfectly fine." "I know," Jake said, "but it feels respectful to try." Smiled. She had known Jake for 3 years and she understood how he thought. He never did things halfway. "How is the princess treating you?" she asked. "She is not treating me any way," Jake said. "She pretends I do not exist." "That must be frustrating." Jake shrugged. "It is what it is. I did not come here expecting to make friends. I came here to do a job." Studied him for a moment. "You are a strange man, Jake." "So I have been told." The next day, something small happened that changed things just a little. Jake was following through a corridor when a young servant stumbled and dropped a tray of ceremonial items. Crystal glasses shattered on the floor. The servant, a young girl who could not have been more than a child, fell to her knees and began gathering the pieces with trembling hands. Her face was pale with fear. Jake could see why. 2 guards were approaching, their expressions hard with disapproval. In the Empire, such mistakes were not forgiven easily. Without thinking, Jake stepped forward and knelt beside the girl. He began helping her pick up the broken pieces. "It is all right," he said softly. "Accidents happen. Here, let me help." The girl looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She had probably never had a human speak kindly to her. Jake gave her a small smile and continued gathering the glass. The guards stopped, uncertain. They had been ready to punish the servant, but now a member of the diplomatic delegation was involved. They looked at each other, unsure what to do. Princess had stopped walking. She stood a few meters away, watching the scene in silence. Jake finished helping the girl clean up the mess. He handed her the tray, now empty but intact, and nodded encouragingly. "There," he said, "good as new, be careful with the sharp pieces." The girl bowed low, whispering words of thanks that Jake's translator barely caught. Then she hurried away before the guards could change their minds. Jake rose and returned to his position behind the princess. He did not look at her. He simply waited for her to continue walking. For a long moment, did not move. Jake could feel her eyes on him, studying him in a way she had never done before. Then she turned and walked on, and he followed. That evening, Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The twin moons had risen, casting silver light over the glowing flowers below. He was alone with his thoughts, enjoying a rare moment of peace. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see approaching. He straightened immediately, preparing to follow her wherever she was going. But she did not walk past him. She stopped beside him and looked out at the gardens. "Why are humans so obsessed with the stars?" she asked. The question surprised him. It was the first time she had spoken to him as if she actually wanted an answer. Jake thought carefully before responding. "For thousands of years," he said, "we looked up at the night sky and dreamed. We did not know what was out there. We only knew that it was beautiful and far away. When we finally built ships that could carry us to the stars, we discovered something wonderful. We discovered that we were not alone." Was silent for a moment. "Most species in the galaxy already knew they were not alone," she said. "The stars have always been full of travelers." "I know," Jake said, "but for us it was new. It was the greatest discovery in our history. To find out that the universe is full of life, full of people, full of stories we have never heard. That felt like a gift." Looked at him. The moonlight made her silver hair glow. "You are strange," she said. "I expected you to talk about conquest or power. That is what I was taught humans care about." Some do, Jake admitted, but not all of us. Many of us just wanted to see what was out there. She did not respond. After a moment, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the palace. Jake stayed on the balcony, looking up at the stars. It was a small conversation, just a few words. But it was a beginning. The Festival of Starlight was the most sacred celebration in the Empire. For one night each year, the people gathered to honor the ancient travelers who had first brought their civilization to the stars. Every noble house sent representatives. Every temple was lit with floating crystals that turned the darkness into a sea of soft light. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful. The grand temple stood at the heart of the capital city, its towers reaching toward the sky like fingers trying to touch the moons. Thousands have filled the great plaza before it, their voices rising in songs that had been sung for 10,000 years. Princess would perform the ritual blessing at the central altar. It was a great honor, one that marked her as the true heir to the throne. The entire empire would be watching. Jake stood at the edge of the crowd, trying to keep in sight. The temple guards had made it clear that he was not welcome close to the altar. This was a ceremony, they said. Human presence near the sacred space would be an insult. He did not argue, but he kept watching. Something felt wrong. Jake had spent years learning to trust his instincts. In his training, his instructors had taught him that the body often knows danger before the mind can name it. Right now, his body was telling him that something was not right. He looked around the plaza, trying to identify the source of his unease. The crowd seemed normal. The guards were in position. The ceremony was proceeding as planned. But there, near the eastern entrance, a group of guards standing in a formation that did not match the others. Their spacing was wrong. Their attention was focused in the wrong direction. Jake moved through the crowd, trying to get a better look. As he did, he noticed something else. His communication device was not working properly. There was static where there should have been a clear signal. Someone was jamming communications. He found Commander near the temple steps. The military officer had made no secret of his hatred for humans. Every time Jake had tried to report something to him, he had been dismissed with contempt. But this was too important to ignore. "Commander," Jake said, keeping his voice calm and respectful, "I believe there may be a security breach. The guards near the eastern entrance are positioned incorrectly, and communications are being jammed." Looked at him with cold eyes. "Human," he said, "you are not qualified to evaluate security. Return to your position and stay out of the way." "Sir, I strongly believe that the princess may be in danger." "The princess is protected by the finest warriors in the empire. She does not need concern from your kind." Turned away. "If you interfere with this ceremony, I will have you removed from the planet." Jake stood frozen for a moment. He could feel the weight of the commander's words. If he was wrong, if he caused a scene at the most sacred ceremony of the year, it would destroy everything the diplomatic mission had worked for. But if he was right and did nothing, could die. He made his choice. Jake pushed through the crowd toward the altar. People shouted at him in anger and confusion. Guards moved to intercept him, but he was faster. He had trained for years to move through crowds, to reach a target before anyone could stop him. Stood at the altar, her hands raised in the final gesture of the blessing. The light from 1,000 crystals surrounded her, making her look like something from a dream. And there, moving through the shadows at the edge of the altar, was a cloaked figure. Jake saw the glint of metal beneath the cloak. He saw the figure's hand reach toward. He did not think, he simply moved. Jake threw himself between the princess and the assassin just as the energy blade swung toward her. The weapon meant for her heart struck his shoulder instead, cutting through flesh and bone with terrible ease. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt, but he did not stop. He grabbed the assassin's arm and twisted, forcing the blade away. They fell together, crashing onto the stone floor of the altar. The assassin was strong, but Jake had surprise on his side. He struck once, twice, 3 times, driving his fist into vulnerable points until the figure stopped struggling. Then the guards were there, pulling the assassin away, shouting orders that Jake could barely hear through the ringing in his ears. He lay on the cold stone, looking up at the crystals floating above him. His blood was spreading beneath him, dark against the white floor. He could feel his strength fading. His face appeared above him. Her golden eyes were wide with shock. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Jake tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "My job," he managed to say. His voice sounded strange and far away. He remembered, even through the pain, that he had touched her when he pushed her aside. Physical contact with royalty was forbidden. He had broken one of their most sacred laws. "I am sorry," he said, "for touching you. I know it is not allowed." Stared at him. Tears were forming in her luminescent eyes. "You foolish human," she said. "You are dying and you apologize for saving my life." Jake wanted to respond, but the darkness was closing in around him. He could hear voices shouting, could feel hands lifting him, but it all seemed to be happening to someone else. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was face, her expression caught between fear and something he had never seen from her before. Something that looked almost like caring. Then everything went dark. On the altar, the blood of a human had stained the sacred stones. The crowd was in chaos. Guards were everywhere, securing the area, searching for other threats. Captain Ben pushed through the confusion to reach his officer. Grant was already there, working desperately to stop the bleeding. "We need to get him to the ship," said. "Now, this is beyond what medicine can treat. His physiology is too different." They carried Jake through the crowd, his blood leaving a trail on the ancient stones. Behind them, Princess stood frozen at the altar, watching the human who had given his life for hers being taken away. Commander approached her, his face grim. "Your Highness," he said, "we should get you to safety." Did not respond. She was still staring at the place where Jake had fallen. She had called him an inconvenience. She had treated him as beneath her notice. And he had thrown himself in front of a blade meant for her heart without a moment of hesitation. For the first time in her life, Princess did not know what to think. But she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she needed that human to survive. She needed to tell him something. She just did not know what it was yet. For 3 days, Jake drifted between life and death. The medical bay of the Horizon Dawn was small but well-equipped. Grant had not slept since they brought Jake in. The wound from the energy blade had done terrible damage, cutting through muscle and nerve in ways that human medicine struggled to repair. "His vitals are dropping again," said to Captain, who stood nearby. "The blade was designed to kill, but the energy it released is attacking his cells in ways I have never seen before." "What can we do?" the captain asked. "I do not know. I have tried everything in our database. Nothing is working." The door to the medical bay opened. Turned, ready to tell whoever it was that this was not a good time. She stopped when she saw Princess standing in the doorway. The princess was not alone. Behind her were 2 carrying cases of medical equipment. They wore the robes of imperial healers, the best doctors in the empire. "I brought specialists," said. Her voice was calm, but noticed that her hands were clasped tightly together. "And medicine that may help. Our weapons are designed to kill our people. We know how to treat the damage they cause." Captain stepped forward. "Your Highness, this is unprecedented. No royal has ever boarded a human vessel." "There is a first time for everything," said. She walked past him to Jake's bedside, looking down at the unconscious man. His face was pale and his breathing was shallow. Machines beeped and hummed around him, fighting to keep him alive. "Will you let my healers help?" she asked. Did not hesitate. "Yes, please." For the next several hours, and human doctors worked side by side. They combined their knowledge, their technology, their understanding of medicine. It was difficult. Human and bodies were very different, but slowly, carefully, they found ways to help each other. By the end of the day, Jake's condition had stabilized. He was still unconscious, still badly hurt, but he was no longer dying. Sat down heavily in a chair, exhausted beyond words. "Thank you," she said too. "You saved his life." "He saved mine first," the princess replied. She had not left the medical bay the entire time. "This is the least I could do." Studied the woman. She had heard stories about Princess, about her coldness and her pride, but the person standing before her now did not match those stories. "Can I ask you something?" said. Nodded. "Why did you really come here? You could have sent the doctors without coming yourself. You are taking a political risk by being on this ship." Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than had ever heard it. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have been asking myself the same question. All I know is that when I saw him fall, when I saw his blood on the altar stones, I felt something I have never felt before. It was like a crack forming in ice that I did not know was there." She looked at Jake's pale face. "He treated me with respect even when I gave him none. He did his duty even when I made it as difficult as possible. And when the moment came, he did not hesitate. He threw himself between me and death without a thought for his own life." Shook her head slowly. "I have known warriors my entire life, brave soldiers who would fight and die for the empire, but I have never seen anyone do what he did, not for someone who had treated them so poorly." Smiled sadly. "That is who Jake is. He does the right thing because it is the right thing. He does not keep score." "I do not understand that," said. "My people always keep score. Honor and debt, favor and obligation, everything is measured." "Maybe that is why it surprised you so much," said. "Because he gave you something without expecting anything in return." The princess did not respond. She simply stood there, watching Jake breathe. Over the next 2 days, returned again and again. She claimed it was to check on the effectiveness of the medicine, but noticed that she spent most of her time simply sitting beside Jake's bed. Sometimes she spoke to him, even though he could not hear her. She told him about the investigation into the assassination attempt. The assassin had been part of a radical group that opposed any alliance with alien species. They believed the empire should remain pure and isolated. Commander had been found to have connections to the group. He claimed he did not know about the assassination plot, but he had been stripped of his rank and confined while the investigation continued. "You were right about him," said to Jake's sleeping form. "You saw that something was wrong and he refused to listen. If he had taken your warning seriously, you would not be lying here." She paused, looking at his bandaged shoulder. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about your people. I thought humans were simple and primitive. I thought your short lives meant you could not understand things the way we do. But I think maybe I had it backwards. Maybe because your lives are short, you understand something we have forgotten. You understand that every moment matters. Every choice counts." She reached out and almost touched his hand before pulling back. "You are foolish, Jake. You almost died for someone who treated you like nothing. That is the most foolish thing I have ever seen." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And also the bravest." On the third night, Jake finally opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the ceiling of the medical bay, lit by soft emergency lights. The second thing he saw was, sitting in a chair beside his bed, her silver hair catching the dim glow. "You are here," he said. His voice was rough and weak. "I am here," she confirmed. There was something different about her face. The coldness was gone. In its place was an expression he could not quite read. "How long?" he asked. 3 days. You almost died several times. Dr. Grant and my healers worked together to save you." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his shoulder, and he fell back against the pillow. "Do not move," said quickly. "You are not healed yet." "The assassin?" he asked. Captured questioned. "The threat has been eliminated." Jake nodded slowly. "Good, that is good." There was silence between them. Jake could see struggling with something, trying to find words that did not come easily. "I hope this means you will finally learn my name," he said. The joke surprised her. A small laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it, bright and genuine in the quiet room. "Jake," she said, "yes, I know your name now." He smiled weakly. "Nice to meet you." Shook her head, but she was smiling too. It transformed her face completely, making her look younger and kinder. "Rest now," she said. "We can talk more when you are stronger." "Will you be here?" he asked. His eyes were already closing, exhaustion pulling him back towards sleep. "Yes," she said softly. "I will be here when you wake." It was a promise. And for the first time, Jake believed she would keep it. 1 week after the assassination attempt, the Imperial throne room was filled with the most important figures in the Empire. Nobles, generals, diplomats, and priests had gathered to witness something that had never happened before in their long history. Jake stood at the center of the great hall, wearing his formal uniform. His shoulder was still bandaged beneath the fabric, and he moved carefully to avoid reopening the wound. But he stood straight and tall, determined to honor this moment properly. Captain Ben stood beside him, along with the rest of the human delegation. They had come to witness their colleague receive the highest honor they could give. Emperor descended from his throne and walked toward Jake. The hall fell completely silent. Even the floating crystals seemed to hold still. "Jake of Earth," the Emperor said, his deep voice filling the chamber. "You came to our world as a stranger. You were treated with suspicion and disrespect. Yet when danger threatened my daughter, you did not hesitate. You placed yourself between her and death, asking nothing in return." The Emperor paused, looking around the hall at his assembled subjects. "This is the kind of courage that our ancient texts speak of, the courage that built our empire, the courage that we have always believed was unique to our people." He turned back to Jake. "You have shown us that we were wrong." He raised his hand, and a servant approached carrying a small box made of crystal. "I name you Friend of the Empire," the Emperor declared. "This title has never been given to anyone outside our species. You will be welcome in any territory, protected by our laws, honored by our people." He opened the box and removed a medallion that seemed to glow with inner light. Carefully, he placed it around Jake's neck. "May this symbol remind all who see it that courage knows no boundaries," the Emperor said, "and that true strength is measured not by the length of one's life, but by what one is willing to sacrifice for others." The hall erupted in applause. Jake bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the moment. When he rose, he saw Princess standing near the throne, watching him with shining eyes. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted for hours. Jake was approached by countless nobles who wanted to speak with him, to hear his story, to thank him for what he had done. It was exhausting, but he endured it with patience and grace. Finally, as the celebration began to wind down, he slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The twin moons were bright in the purple sky, casting silver light over everything below. He was not surprised when found him there. She walked to his side and stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the same view he was admiring. "How does it feel," she asked, "being a friend of the Empire?" "Strange," he admitted. "A month ago I was just a security officer from Kansas. Now I am in the history books." "You will be remembered long after you are gone," said. "Your name will be taught to children for generations." Jake shook his head slowly. "I did not do it for fame or honor. I just did what seemed right." "I know," she said. "That is what makes it meaningful." She reached into a fold of her robe and something small and bright. It was a crystal, no larger than Jake's thumb, but it glowed with a deep violet light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. "This is a bonding crystal," said. "In my culture, we give them only to those we consider family. They are passed from parent to child, from partner to partner. They are never given lightly." Jake looked at the crystal, then at her face. "I want you to have it," she said, "because you showed me something I did not know I needed to learn. I spent my whole life believing that humans were inferior, that your short lives and violent history made you unworthy of respect. You proved that I was wrong." She pressed the crystal into his hand. "Courage is not about strength or power or how many years you live. It is about what you are willing to do for others. It is about kindness shown without expectation of reward. These are things my people have forgotten in our pride and our long lives. You reminded me of them." Jake looked at the crystal glowing softly in his palm. He could feel warmth spreading from it, not just physical warmth but something deeper. "I do not know what to say," he admitted. "You do not have to say anything," replied. "Just know that you will always have a place in my empire and in my heart." Their eyes met. Something passed between them that did not need words. "I have to leave tomorrow," Jake said quietly. "The Horizon Dawn is returning to Earth." "I know. But I could come back, if you wanted me to." Smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, so different from the cold expressions she had worn when they first met. "I would like that very much," she said. The next morning, the Horizon Dawn prepared for departure. The crew made their final checks, said their final goodbyes. Captain had already thanked the Emperor for the successful diplomatic mission. The trade alliance between Earth and the Empire was signed and sealed, a historic achievement that would benefit both civilizations. Jake stood at the edge of the loading platform, his bag over his good shoulder. He was watching the palace in the distance, its towers catching the morning light. He was not surprised when appeared one last time. She walked toward him with purpose, her silver hair flowing behind her. When she reached him, she stopped close enough that he could see the golden light flickering in her eyes. "Do not forget your promise," she said. "I never break my promises," he replied. She nodded, satisfied. Then, to the shock of every guard watching, she reached out and took his hand. Physical contact between a princess and a commoner was forbidden. Between a royal and a human, it was unthinkable. Did not seem to care. "Safe travels, Jake," she said. "Take care of yourself," he replied. For a long moment they simply stood there, hands clasped together. Then she released him and stepped back. Jake boarded the ship without looking back. He knew that if he looked back, he might not be able to leave. The Horizon Dawn lifted off from the palace platform and rose into the purple sky. It passed through the clouds, through the atmosphere into the darkness of space. The stars surrounded them, bright and beautiful and endless. Jake stood at the observation window, watching Prime grow smaller behind them. In his hand, he held the bonding crystal, its violet light pulsing gently against his palm. Captain appeared beside him. "Are you all right?" the captain asked. Jake was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. "I think," he said slowly, "this is just the beginning." Far below, on the surface of the alien world, Princess stood on a balcony and watched the human ship disappear into the stars. She felt strange, lighter than she had in years. The ice that had surrounded her heart was melting, and in its place was something new. Something that felt like hope. She placed her hand over her heart and smiled. The princess who had said no had finally found something worth saying yes to. And somewhere among the stars, a human from Kansas carried a piece of her heart with him, a small crystal glowing with the promise of tomorrow. This was not an ending. It was the beginning of everything.